It's 11 p.m. at night and you're preparing yourself to sleep. All of a sudden you just hear your neighbors starting to speak loudly. So you get closer to the sound and then you start to hear what appears to be bottles being broken from the same direction from your neighbor house. And you hear children crying, and so what is happening? Is this domestic violence or is this tough love and you should not get involved? Stay tuned. Unfortunately, guys, that is the reality that many families in the Caribbean have to face on a daily basis. And whatever you may call it, domestic violence, domestic abuse, relationship abuse, intimate partner abuse, whatever it's called, domestic violence really is the displaying of controlling and abusive behavior by one person against the next person that harms the person's health, well-being, and safety. And this is why, for me, domestic violence in the Caribbean is such a significant topic that we need to pay more attention to. And why in this video I'm going to be speaking about the persons who are affected by domestic violence and the types of domestic violence. Let's get into this now. The governments in various Caribbean countries have introduced laws to address the issue of domestic violence. In fact, some countries recently made amendments to their Domestic Violence Act. That's the short title of the act. And many persons believe that domestic violence really refers only to husband and wife abuse. But if you look at the acts in the various countries, there's one common thread in most of them. It's called the domestic relationship. Domestic violence occurs in domestic relationships. So what is domestic relationship? Let me explain that. Domestic relationship would include persons who are married or persons who were married. It would also include cohabitants or persons who are former cohabitants. Cohabitants being persons who are in a relationship for more than 5 years or they're living together. We commonly call it common law relationship. That's different from entanglements. Well, the law would also include that as well, because the law look at persons who are in dating relationships. If there's abuse taking place there, you could also apply for a protection order. If you're in a visiting relationship as well, you could also apply for a protection order. Persons who have children together, they could also apply for a domestic violence protection order. And I'll explain protection orders in my other videos. See, the law covers domestic relationships in a very broad way. In fact, the amendments recently made in some countries also include what is called residential institutions. So adults who are being abused either by the owner, an employee, or even a volunteer in a home for the aged or so, they could also apply for a protection order. Interestingly enough, that is the case. You have children who could also apply for protection orders, whether it be a biological child, whether it be an adopted child, whether it be, as you know, in the Caribbean there's a lot of taking care of nieces, taking care of nephews. Even those persons, according to the law, could apply for a protection order either by themselves or through a relevant party. You also have, let me see if I'm forgetting any, dependents. Dependents could also apply if you are differently able. You could also apply for a protection order if you're being abused. And I think I've covered most. Those are the persons. So really, if you're in a domestic relationship and you're being abused, you could apply for a protection order. So what type of abuse needs to exist in order for you to apply for a protection order? Let's get into that now. Domestic violence is displayed in various forms. The one that most persons would be familiar with would be the ones that actually leave marks all over your skin. That would be physical abuse. For example, shoving, hitting, biting, poking somebody, slapping somebody, even using a weapon to attack somebody, strangling somebody. I've seen various types in court when it comes to physical abuse. One of the worst, or some of the worst cases, would be hog tying somebody and then throwing a couch on somebody, pushing somebody in a fridge and closing the fridge, using knives and stabbing the person. Yeah, so various forms of physical abuse. And I'm sure that you may have heard of physical abuse, or you may know of some type. So what you could do is just leave in the comments below some scenario that you know of or something that you may have heard. So this is what we call a physical abuse form of domestic violence. Another form of domestic violence would be sexual abuse. Now you realize that some of these actions starts to border criminal action. So sometimes a protection order may work, but the police would also get involved to bring criminal charges against the persons. So imagine being in a domestic relationship and then your partner is forcing you to perform certain sexual acts. It's unnecessary or unwanted kissing and hugging, all of that amounts to sexual abuse. You have, for example, forcing a person to take explicit photos or nudes and then holding those photos as a kind of power over the person, sending nudes to other persons. That as well as sexual abuse. For example, forcing a person to get pregnant or preventing a person from using contraceptives is also a form of sexual abuse. Economic abuse could be defined as an abuser avoiding his or her financial obligations to a person in a domestic relationship. It could even speak to the abuser making the victim or the survivor dependent upon them financially. So this would include things like avoiding or preventing a person from actually working. It would include managing or controlling the finances. It would also speak to interfering with or using a person's personal information to interfere with their credit rating, or even withholding the necessities, medication, food, clothing from a person in the domestic relationship. The other forms of domestic violence, I'll categorize them as verbal, psychological and emotional. When you look at the various acts in the Caribbean, you see where some acts, they actually define domestic violence as harassment, intimidation. They even separate verbal, psychological accordingly. But just for this video, I'm going to see how we could incorporate all of them under this category. So this would include things like intimidating an individual, following a person who was in a former relationship with you, sending text messages, unwanted text messages constantly, emails. It is where sometimes you're belittling a person who you're in a relationship with, embarrassing this person, humiliating this person in one way or the next, also isolating the person from their family members and their friends, again trying to weaken the person so that they won't have a proper support system. You also have, for example, sending messages, threat messages as well to these persons who are in a domestic relationship with you. All of these are forms of psychological abuse, making the person feel as though they're inferior, making the person feel weak, making various statements, abusive languages about themselves, about their family members, and the list could go on. So all of these are forms of verbal, psychological and emotional abuse. And these, I think, sometimes could really have a great impact on persons. You know, they normally say that sticks and stones could break your bones, but words can't hurt you. But imagine these are persons who are experiencing this type of violence and they're just there by themselves most times and they're unable to voice their frustration with persons. And my goal in these videos is really for you guys out there who are experiencing domestic violence to be empowered, to know that there are persons out here who care, whether it be the police officers, whether it be your attorney, or you could just go and make your application as well by the court. Remember, even though I'm an attorney, I can't give you legal advice. I can't do that over social media, but I'm sure that there are some of my colleagues out there in the various jurisdictions who would be willing to help. So don't just sit there and believe that, you know, persons might change you. So if you need help, you need help. What I'll do is I'll try to leave some numbers in the description downstairs so that you'll be able to follow up with contacting somebody who may be able to assist you. You guys, we've come to the end of this particular video. If you haven't already, I would recommend that you just subscribe and share this video with other persons, because I have a next video that's going to be coming up speaking about how you apply for a protection order and what is a protection order and so on and so on. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I'm David. Thank you for being on my channel, The Legal Journey, where I speak about law and lifestyle. So I'll see you in my next video. You keep good for now and be safe.